Let's continue the discussion and bring in now from the Henry Jackson Society think tank, Alan Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make for the grounds, the justification for this US-UK attack?
Well, I think it's, as has been, kind of largely trailed across our TV screens over the last few hours. Basically, we've had a series of attacks, interdiction of international shipping in the Red Sea, in the Straits, and the UN Security Council has issued a resolution this week that, of course, said enough of this, and if there, expect consequences. This is on top, of course, an international coalition agreeing on that basis. And the Houthis, had continued with significant attacks this week that the US and UK repelled. And, this was due as a result of that. If the Houthis failed to stop attacking, we had to do something, and we've done it.
Do you think the Houthis will respond?
Well, it's difficult to see how they will respond. I mean, the first question, of course, is how much damage was done to and what capabilities. Now, we don't, of course, know exactly what targets were hit, but we're going to assume that a lot of this was Houthi targeting capabilities, the things that the Houthis would need to use in order to respond. But, of course, in the Middle East, things, don't necessarily happen the next day. Houthi response could occur in a few months' time in that sense. But I think, what the military strikes will have done is to have had a salutary effect for now on the Houthis. It's not going to stop them. It's not going to stop them from doing what they want to do. But it will temporarily, I think, disable them from significant reprisals against us.
Are there further, only slightly incremental steps that the US and the UK can take, or do we start now to get into the area where it becomes not quite all or nothing, but if the Houthis don't get the message from this, do we have to do something much more significant?
Well, you can probably keep on doing, sort of airstrikes for a while. There'll be no doubt many more targets that can be hit, different types of targets that the Houthis will not want to be hit, that we will know about and can target. So there is certainly the ability to, if there is a reprisal of some kind, to continue with more strikes. At some point, though, of course, that strategy does run out of steam, and you've got to then decide whether you're, sort of going to leave it be or go further in. But I don't think we're near that point right now. And I think everything now depends on not only the Houthis, but how Iran wants to handle this. The Iranians are supporting, funding, supplying the Houthis. They're the real players here. They're the ones who are pulling the strings. What do they want is the big question.
And what is your assessment of that? Do you think that they're going to be wanting to respond themselves?
Well, they won't respond themselves, of course, because that will lead them to being open to reprisals again from Western sources. What they may intend to be doing is using whichever of their proxy groups they can to sort of have a go at the West in wherever they can. It's interesting, for example, they haven't committed Hezbollah to the Israel war, basically. That's interesting because it suggests that they feel that it's too dangerous and too risky to do that. But maybe the Houthis are an option they would like to bring in and utilize. We've also seen militias in Iraq being utilized, Iranian-backed militias. So clearly what they're trying to do right now is to antagonize and to test, I think, the reactions of the West as well, to see what will happen and to see whether any comeback eventually falls on them as well. So it's a game of cat and mouse right now.
We just heard from Sir Keir Starmer. Clearly, the leaders of the two biggest parties in the UK are aligned for now on this. What about in the US? Is there unity across the political islands? Obviously, recently on Ukraine, there's been some divisions.
Yes, I think right now there is a very different setting to Ukraine. And I think it would be difficult to see many Republicans say who wouldn't agree with it. There might be, of course, some Democrats who don't agree with this on the grounds of, of the Houthis' self-declared defending of the Palestinians moment. So it is interesting. You might get slivers of parties on the extremes not supporting it, but I can't see why a targeted, limited strike after a UN resolution would cause much consternation even in the US today.
In terms of more broadly, I mean, we did see Italy say they were invited to take part, but they didn't want to because they'd need to get parliamentary approval first. What do you read from that? I mean, obviously, earlier there was a UN resolution which suggests some international consensus in this general area. Not necessarily specifically for this military action overnight. Do you think the UK and the US are going to have sufficient support from others for this to be able to continue if it needs to?
Well, in a sense, the US and UK don't need support from others. We've got the capabilities to do this ourselves. Obviously, we want as broad a coalition defending international law as possible. And I think it is heartening to see that, while there have been some countries that chose not to take part, countries like Australia have stepped up quite, vigorously to do their bit in this as well. And I don't think at this stage, given what the UN has said, given that even the Russians and Chinese did not veto the resolution, I can't see why there would be a falling off of support right now when it's so obvious that what the Houthis is doing is wrong. So I think, as long as that continues to be the case, and there are obvious reasons for why international action should be taken, then we are going to get widespread, kind of coalitions of support in, helping the US and UK in this mission.
I'm just mentioning that Reuters reporting that at least 4 oil tankers are diverting course from the Red Sea following those airstrikes, and the German Foreign Ministry saying, you can assume that we're in close contact with our partners and we're not surprised by US-UK strikes in Yemen. Before I let you go, I just wanted to pivot and ask you, Dr. Mendoza, about the fact that Rishi Sunak's in Ukraine and pledging more financial support. It's actually quite a small amount of support, not for the UK, but relative to what the EU and the US have failed to deliver. Just give us your quick take on all of that.
Well, I think it's significant that he's decided in the middle of this, if you like it, of the Middle East crisis, to go to Ukraine to remind the world that there is a war raging there that we absolutely must help the Ukrainians to win. This is going to be a pivotal year, 2024, I think, in the Ukrainian conflict. And the one thing we know is that if Western support falls away from Ukraine, if Ukraine does not get the kit and the money it needs to keep fighting, then inevitably the Russians will likely secure some kind of victory there. And we can't allow that because, of course, the aggression the Russians have shown is an affront to all civilized nations. And I think what Rishi Sunak is showing is that we will not drop the baton on this, and we will have to continue pushing our allies to do the same.